Chapter 1. The Beginning. "You got me again, Vorehees," Richard sighed. Once again he'd lost the donor war in Lumi's stream. "Why can't you let me win for just one day, Vorehees? We've been fighting for so long." Vorehees' face shifted, and he looked down. He took his headset off and placed it on his desk, whispering so quiet that a pin could be heard as it dropped. Vorehees revealed, "Because if the fight ends, I'll never get to see you again." Richard's eyes widened. Did I hear that correctly? Vorehees?" Richard stared at his computer screen. Vorehees has ended the call. Chapter 2. New Year's Day Special. 12 a.m. It was finally New Year's, a time to rejoice about the year that had passed, but also to think ahead about goals for the future. For Vorehees, there was one simple goal: to make Richard, his Twitch stream Dono War rival, into his boyfriend. "Happy New Year's, Richard." Vorehees kept his voice just above a whisper. He was beginning to get tired, with the dim glow of his phone being the only light in his room. Vorehees was met with silence. "Richard?" He panicked. Did Richard hang up? Was this the end? Was Richard telling Vorehees that he was going to leave his hopefully future lover in 2025? Forever? Vorehees' heart started pumping. He felt the walls closing in. All this effort, all this money put into Lumi's bank account, all of it would be for nothing if he couldn't woo Richard into being his boyfriend. But then, Vorehees' eyes traveled to the square with Richard's face in it. They'd graduated to video call recently, a feat that Vorehees would forever cherish. Richard was asleep, with his mouth hanging ajar, just enough that the tiniest hint of drool had begun to make its way onto his pillow. Vorehees smiled. There was nothing to worry about. Richard just fell asleep, on call with Vorehees. Nothing had changed. Vorehees traced his finger along the screen, making note of every fine detail in Richard's face. The way his nose had the tiniest bump in its bridge, the faint stubble that lined his chin. Someday, Vorehees swore to himself, it wouldn't be a screen. It would be real, and Richard would be his. Richard would be his to love, to cherish, to spin in the air, to cook dinner for, to buy chocolates for, to surprise with a "this made me think of you" gift. Vorehees would be the second best boyfriend in the world, and Richard would be the first. Chapter 3. Silence. It had been 3 weeks. Actually 24 days, but Richard hadn't been counting. Richard stared at his computer screen. It was 3 a.m. Why was he doing this? He should be asleep right now, resting up for his corporate job selling reusable plastic food containers. It shouldn't matter to Richard. Matter of fact, it doesn't. Richard could not give a care in the world if Vorehees never responded again. After all, Vorehees is just an online friend, right? Richard sighed. Why was he so worked up about something that never even mattered? Vorehees was probably too busy for the life of a Neetopian Luma. Maybe he picked up an important project, unable to dedicate the time to watching Lumi suffer in Minecraft from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Maybe Vorehees was on vacation, having the time of his life in a fancy wooden cabin, away from the prisons of screens and social media. Maybe he got a new job, and now he spends all his time making back the money he donated. Maybe he died a horrible death, never to be seen again, except under a granite headstone that glistened in the moonlight. Or maybe Vorehees got a girlfriend. Richard felt a knot in his stomach. What was wrong with him? Richard's eyes drifted back to his computer screen. Had it really been this long since his last exchange of messages with Vorehees? His eyes traveled to the date displayed on the screen, right next to the last DM. Was it something he said? Richard racked his brain for an answer, for an indication, a hint, a sign, anything. There had to be something wrong with Richard. At the ripe age of 36, Richard had faced the ups and downs of many a friendship. In college, he was rejected from his friend's fraternity because he refused to down a whole bottle of vodka in 20 seconds, and then his friend never spoke to him again out of sheer embarrassment. Richard had lost a friend before, so why did it feel so different this time? It was 4 a.m. now. Richard had spent the last hour panicking about the fact that a man he met online hadn't returned his text messages. Chapter 4. Return. Another month had passed. 30 more days of Richard's mundane life, all down the drain. Everything was gray, it was dull, it was nothing. At this point, Richard knew exactly why. There was no denying it. It was because Vorehees had been gone for so long. What Richard didn't know, however, was why he felt this way. For as long as Richard could remember, he only had eyes for women. As a young child, he ran as fast as he could during recess to beat the other boys and be heralded as the fastest runner. In high school, he took a girl to prom. As an adult, he passed strategically worded pickup lines onto sweet belles he'd hoped to woo. So what in tarnation was Richard feeling now? Slumped on his leather armchair, with his dog in his lap, Richard sat contemplating. Was everything he knew about himself a lie? Richard could have spent an hour just sitting there, trying to decode his feelings. Luckily for him, he was immediately jolted from his trance-like train of thought. Ding. Richard scrambled. He nearly dropped his mobile phone in the process as he fumbled to type the 4-digit passcode into the number box. 1, 2, 3, 4. His calloused finger made a beeline for the Discord app icon, which was glaringly displaying a red circle that had a 1 in it. Was today finally the day? Did Vorehees come back? Richard dropped his phone. It finally happened. Vorehees returned. Richard took off his readers, wiped them, and put them on again. Was his mind playing tricks on him? No, it was real. After 2 whole months, Vorehees finally came back. Did you miss me, Winky Face? Richard could never admit it, not to Vorehees. At a speed of 13 words per minute, Richard replied, "That is none of your business," followed immediately by, "However, I am curious as to your whereabouts for the past 2 months. Richard was a very formal texter. Ding. Sorry I was gone for so long. Bit of a long story. Richard sent back a total of 2 words, back to his soon-to-be lover. Indulge me. Chapter 5. Explanation. Ding. Richard was nervous. He'd been pondering, wondering, worrying, losing his gosh darn mind over Vorehees' disappearance for 2 full months, and now he would finally learn what happened. Is it okay if we call? It's a bit of a doozy. Richard sighed. He supposed it would be appropriate for a phone call in such a situation, but he grew even more apprehension about Vorehees. What was so important that it warranted a phone call over a text message exchange? Richard knew that most of the youngins these days usually preferred to text. Despite his unease, Richard accepted the call before the ringtone could even sound. Okay, Vorehees paused, seemingly getting his whirlwind of a mind in order. Richard had never understood how Vorehees' thoughts could always be so disorganized and loud and messy. Yet at the same time, the chaos of his psyche seemed to complement the quiet and minimalistic order which Richard most definitely possessed. It was like they were opposites that could still be pulled together, like the north and south poles of a magnet. Richard? The sound of Vorehees' voice pulled Richard right back into reality. He wasn't here to theorize. He was here to listen. Richard needed to put a pin in his lollygagging. As I was saying, I ended up in a lot of credit card debt. Hold on. Wait just one diddly darn minute, Richard immediately interjected. I think I might have missed something. You got into credit card debt? I hate to say it, Richard, but yes, I did. Vorehees sounded nearly humiliated. It must have taken a lot of confidence for him to confide something like this in his potentially, possibly somewhat more than friend. The money I spent when upping you in all those dono wars wasn't exactly mine. And then I couldn't pay off my card because it just got so intense and... The next part was seemingly even more embarrassing for Vorehees. It was like Richard could feel the faint glow of a blush coming off of Vorehees' face. Dagnabbit, what was Richard thinking? Now was not the time for whatever that was. I had to sell my PC. Richard's eyes widened, and his bushy brown eyebrows traveled up his face. Your whole PC? Yeah, and my phone. Oh, and I got evicted from my apartment. It's been a bit of a wild past 2 months, don't you think? Vorehees laughed nervously. For just one moment, Richard's face softened, and a piece of his rock-hard exterior chipped off. What was this feeling? Was it concern? Richard couldn't really tell. He'd had too many feelings for a rough-hearted man's man lately. Man's man? Even his own inner monologue was corrupted. Vorehees? Richard almost asked Vorehees the question that was itching to be released from his whiskered lips. Almost showed Vorehees that he truly did care about the young man's well-being. Instead, he said this. You need to learn how to be more fiscally responsible.